Welcome back to What the Fertility Season 3. This morning we are sitting down with both Sara and Brady Hand. Brady was diagnosed with Kallman syndrome, which can negatively impact male fertility in several different ways, often directly affecting the production of sperm. Sara, on the other hand, was diagnosed with diminished ovarian reserve after her first round of IVF and later diagnosed with lupus, which all three are playing a role into their continued story to parenthood. So welcome, Brady. Welcome, Sara. We are so excited to have both of you on the show this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Brady, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks for having us again. So I guess our journey kind of started. I mean, we've been dating for a while back in college. We met freshman year. And during that time, I was having like issues with like really low energy and just a bunch of other side effects. So just going to the doctor, trying to figure out what was going on. I went to multiple different doctors. Eventually, I went to an endocrinologist who found out that there must have been something wrong with like my pituitary gland. So they did a scan and they didn't find, they were actually expecting to see like some kind of tumor or something. It came back clear, and then they did a couple other blood tests, and it came back that I had Kallman syndrome, which basically just means that I was going through puberty either late or just not at all. So my testosterone level was really, really low. So at that time, I suppose they put me on testosterone treatment. At that time, I didn't really question anything. I was naive to everything in the world. I mean, you trust the doctor, what they have to say. And later on, we figured out that it's giving a lot more issues than what we had anticipated.
So how old were you, Brady, when you got that original diagnosis?
I suppose that was when I was like 19 years old. So it was
So
sophomore.
definitely like not thinking kids, right?
No, not at all. We were dating for like a year at that time. So that was like not even a question I had for the doctor, and just nothing that I was even expecting. So it was just like really caught off guard later on in life when we are trying to go through this, and we're hit with news. And of course, so moving forward, when we were trying to get pregnant, I went to the endocrinologist, and he just said, "Oh, no worries. We'll just put you on a different medication, and then, give it 3 to 6 months, and then you should be able to have a child from there." So we went ahead. I had switched my medication. Well, they told me to start taking HCG, and they didn't tell me to stop taking the testosterone. So I was on both for quite a while. And it was probably 6 or 9 months that I was on both medications before we weren't having any luck getting pregnant. So I went back to the doctor, and he said, "Oh, you're supposed to stop taking the testosterone. That's the issue." Well, this whole time I'm taking two medications, and the HCG is a super expensive drug that I'm taking, and the cost is just through the roof. And we're just like really just frustrated on why they didn't tell us this right away. So after that, it was probably 3 to 6 months after, still no luck. I went back, and they did a semen analysis at that time, and my semen was basically at a level of 0. They didn't detect anything. Like, it came back on the lab as 0, but when they were looking under the microscope, they could see just a little bit. But yeah, it was just like really disheartening at that time, just knowing that I was the one causing the issue of our infertility at that time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was going to say, number one, thank you for coming on and sharing all that. I think there's a lot of men that, the episode we literally did last weekend was her husband's similar situation, obviously not the same diagnosis, but he was ultimately completely infertile. I have so many questions. So you guys start trying naturally, right? I hear Brady say 3 to 6 months. So you're like 6 months in this process when you get the diagnosis of no, like, I guess, viable sperm.
Yeah, basically. It was actually a little bit longer because I was on double medication, and then it was like 3 to 6 months after that. So it's probably like a year and a half of trying with no luck. And then that's when we got the first semen analysis back that it was basically at nothing. At that time, we were just so naive to what was even going on. We never talked to our fertility doctor. It was all just through my endocrinologist, and he was just giving me a standard protocol without actually knowing more serious what was happening.
Yeah. So Sara, I see you over there. You're like, yes, that was very expensive, and I'm sure it took a toll on you emotionally as well. How did you handle that diagnosis?
Um, at first I think it was like, okay, like that's not too bad. Like there's something we can do about this. There seems to be a solution or, progress to a solution. Um, but I think the thing from like a wife perspective is it kind of made him crazy.
Yeah. So not taking this testosterone, it's in switching over to the HCG, my levels of testosterone had just dropped basically. And I just had like no energy, just going into basically depression. Anxiety was kicking in just with everything, like having no luck, spending all this money with no outcome or resolution. It was just like really tough on me to continue to take that medication for
Yeah, and
longer
your
periods of time.
hormones are you're basically having to take, a hit on your own personal hormones to try to have conception, which is so unique because typically it's the female that's going through that process. And obviously, like, I want you guys to get into your story, but ultimately, you both probably were going through the process at the same time. So you get that diagnosis at that point, Sara Brady. Do they say, maybe it's time to look into some additional ways to conceive?
Yeah, I think from there, like your endocrinologist was like, well, you need to go see, the reproductive specialist. So we went to that clinic. And basically, in the consultation, they're like, yep, IVF's your only option. Like they didn't even consider anything else just because like of like the male factor side. Um, so then obviously again, we're naive, like, what's IVF? What does that all entail? And they're like, it's shots in the stomach and everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like
Oh,
I hate shots. Like I want nothing to do with them. I don't want to look at them. Like, so then I'm just like anxious. I'm like, are you kidding me? I have to go through all this stuff.
right.
So then, yeah, that kind of led into our first round that we did in February of 2023.
Yeah, 2023. Yeah.
Doesn't it seem
Yeah.
like years? I mean, I
Trying to
get
figure
it.
out what year is what happens here.
And
Um,
I think like women and I mean couples that sit down for their very first visit and they're told IVF's your only option. Like it's such a jump, right? You're like, I was just over here trying to have a baby. I haven't even been in this field. And now they're telling you to like, you have to do one of the most extreme procedures to become pregnant. It's difficult.
Yeah, and at that time, we didn't even know it was like the most extreme. It was almost like when we were in there and they said IVF and they told us like this is what you have to do and you'll become pregnant. It was almost like a relief for us because we were like, finally, we can go through this process and we can have a child instead of still waiting for results and like trying to raise my levels and stuff. Like we had this solution that they just said, do this and you have a child. And yeah, literally, that's not the way it works.
yeah. We didn't really know.
Right. That's very,
Yeah, IVF was not a guarantee.
Yeah.
but it's an interesting perspective. Like you were so tired of just trying to figure out an option to conceive, and they're like, here's this on a silver platter. So last year, February 2023, you gear up for your first round.
First round. Yep. Brady, thankfully, he understands the medical side. He like knew and understood like how to, draw up the medication and give the medication. So he was thankfully my nurse like the whole entire time. So I didn't have to give myself a shot.
Yeah. So
That's
which is a blessing, but it also became hard too because we have to do it at the same time every day, just making sure that you have that consistent schedule. And with our work lives and stuff, it became a little bit difficult at sometimes, but we made it work, and I'm proud of her for taking all those shots because just me sitting there giving them to her, I was like, this is not fun.
Yeah. So then I guess we can lead into egg retrieval. We had that on the lovely Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day will never be the same.
wow. No. Oh my goodness, of all the days.
Yep.
Oh.
So we went in and I'm like super anxious, we like, okay, this is it. This is, this, we're going to get a miracle out of this. And then, yeah, we kind of go in, and then I come out and then they tell you how many eggs are retrieved. And then they're like, oh, we got 5 retrieved. And it's like, only 5? Like, we're looking at the Pinterest boards, like, and it's saying, 12 to 15 to 20. And we're like, what happened?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, we suspected that you had diminished ovarian reserve, but we didn't want to scare you. So we didn't like tell you that, you had that, or that we were anticipating that you had that. And I'm like sitting over here, are you kidding me? Like, I'm almost more now upset and frustrated because like, I didn't know, like, yes, I probably would have been a little stressed and crushed, but like, at least I would have known what to expect instead of just being dropped with this bomb. Like, hey, we kind of knew this, but here you go.
Well, and it was at the worst time too, because she just came out of the like operating room. She's still high on drugs and
Yeah.
she's crying just because of all emotions are high. And then they give us this news, and it was just like, wait, hold on, what?
Right,
So
like, just maybe reset my set my
Yes,
expectations going in. I mean, I know I was similar, you come out, and I think, Amanda, I don't know if they do it at your clinic, but they, like, write the number on your hand, and, I mean, I had under 10, I don't know, Amanda, I don't remember
Yeah,
if you did.
I had 5 for one and then 4 or 3 for another.
But to y'all's point, exactly, your expectations are what you're seeing online of, like, seeing those boards, and you're like, you know that the attrition rate goes down so quickly day to day. And so anybody starting with under 10, you're like, there's no way it's going to even end up with 1. So we definitely both can resonate with that. So at that time, did they diagnose you with diminished ovarian reserve in a sense?
They just said that they suspected it, but again, there was no like clear communication, like, or even like follow up on like what that actually meant.
yeah.
Right.
Oh.
So, I mean, even now, like they still haven't, said anything to us. We've done our own research.
It's not like written in her chart or anything that's
Right.
that. And it's just, we kind of had to do all the research on it because none of our follow-up doctor's appointments did they really mention that. But it's like they said it in after we came out of the operating room, and we only had that. So it's like, okay, that's our diagnosis. Like, well, I guess we'll self-diagnose ourselves,
Sure. I definitely understand. So you have 5 eggs and then you start waiting.
Yeah. Then it kind of dwindles down. They said we had 4 that were mature. So like the quality of that round was really good. And then I think 3 fertilized, and then 1 dropped off. And then we had 2 embryos that made it to the blastocyst stage. We did the PGTA testing, and then you wait forever.
Yeah.
For the testing. And then we finally got that phone call, and we're sitting there and we're like, okay, like God is going to provide, like we got 2, this is like going to be awesome. And then we get the news that only 1 was viable, and then the other one had some like chromosome errors or something.
Extra chromosomes.
So then we're like, okay, we have 1, like we are so thankful, God's giving us 1 embryo. And then we did the transfer April 11th last year. Waited the 2 weeks, and that was like stressful. I never cheated.
Yeah, we didn't want to do the pregnancy test like at home. Like we were just waiting to go to the doctor and like get the news or like hear the phone call. And yeah, basically she went in for the blood test, and then we were just anticipating the rest of that day, just waiting for the phone call from the doctor to let us know. We recorded ourselves, and luckily enough, we were pregnant. So we were super excited at that time.
Yeah, super ecstatic. So then obviously you're starting the progesterone shots, doing all that. Again, Brady was doing all that. Super fabulous.
Those progesterones are so difficult. Okay, I have one question before we keep going. So I know, Brady, you have your diagnosis, and I heard you kind of mention it in the beginning. While the result came back of no sperm, you said once they were like looking under the microscope that there were a few. I'm assuming, did you guys, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing, I'm assuming, did you use your sperm to create these embryos?
Yes, we did. So they actually had me do another semen sample as well, so that way I had like 2 vials, so that way they could basically choose.
With ICSI or
Yeah. So then they froze those, and then they were able to still, since they were able to see it under the microscope, they could still use them even though my levels were so low.
And he also froze more the day of egg retrieval, so we had some backup for
future rounds. Or whatnot.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I feel like that's so hopeful for couples. That I don't know the percentage of your specific diagnosis, but again, I mean, just in the last few weeks, we've had partners on that were deemed like no viable sperm. I just think that's so hopeful that there could potentially be a way to still utilize the sperm.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So you're pregnant.
Yes. Yeah. So that was like, okay, God gave us this miracle. This is amazing. IVF worked. And then in early May, I started to bleed early in the week on a Monday. And I was like, oh, like this does not feel right. So I called the clinic, and they're like, okay, like, since it's kind of just like tapering off and it wasn't a whole lot, like we'll get you in on Friday. And I was like, okay, great. It stopped for the rest of the week. And then Friday I'm at work, and we didn't have our appointment until like 2 p.m.
Yep.
And it was like lunchtime, and I kind of like, I don't know how much details I should give.
You can share what you're comfortable
Right.
with.
But like I felt a little something, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and it was not a little something. There was a lot of blood, and then like it started to like clot. So then I was like, okay, like this has to be a miscarriage. Like if this is not, like, then I don't know, there's something seriously wrong. And so I'm sitting in the bathroom panicking, like not knowing what to do. Like again, it was more blood than like my period, so I'm like, ah. So then like the crazy part is like all I had was my Apple Watch. I didn't have my phone, and I'm like, okay, what do I do? So I called my coworker in to give me my phone, and so I could call Brady and just let him know what was going on, and call the clinic, and they're like, okay, like, just put a pad in or something and just watch the bleeding, and then like come in for your appointment. So we did all that. We get to the appointment, and then they do the ultrasound, and like at that point I had no hope. Like I'm like, this has to just be a miscarriage.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I mean, they found a heartbeat. We were able to see baby at that time. But they said that there was a subchorionic hemorrhage, and it was a very like large one. It was like 5 centimeters by something, whatever. And I'm like, well, what's that?
Mhm.
Basically, they told me there's nothing that they can do. My body just has to do its thing, and then you just hope and pray that baby continues to grow, and then the hemorrhage just releases and
Yep.
everything. So then they scheduled another appointment the following Thursday, and then again just monitor like the blood and everything. So by Saturday, like I didn't have any more bleeding, so I'm like, okay, we're in the clear, like we're
Mhm.
good, like everything is fine. And then we get to that appointment. Again, things are fine. We take the picture. We're like, yep, we're going to see baby
All
again.
smiles
Like, this
and
is super exciting. And then she's, doing the ultrasound, and it's quiet. She's looking around again, and, it's quiet. And then I kind of look at Brady, and I'm like, you just get that sinking feeling, because she educated us a little bit last time on what to look for. You saw the colors, you saw like
for the
whatever.
heartbeat. And yeah,
Nothing.
that's when I was looking at it, and I was just like, there's no heartbeat. I just knew. And I think that's when you looked at me and you're just heart sank, and it's just like, we knew
Yeah.
at that time like what it was.
Yeah.
And
Then you hear the dreaded words from the ultrasound tech, like, I'm so sorry, there's no heartbeat. And then it's like,
yeah,
there's no words.
no, you just totally were. We were expecting it the week before, and we thought, now we're in the clear, like there's no chance, like there's no bleeding, like we're totally fine.
Yeah.
And she said that, and she couldn't really tell us anymore because
Yeah.
we had to talk to the actual doctor.
Right.
So we just went and talked to the doctor, and
Yeah.
I guess
Basically, the doctor told us, you have the options of letting your body, naturally like miscarry, all the different options, right? So obviously for us, we're like, let's do the natural one. We already spent a lot of money, like try to do that. She gave us 2 weeks to let my body naturally miscarry. 1 week went by, nothing. Week 2 went by, nothing. So we go back in, and then they did the ultrasound. And the weird part is they actually said that like the placenta was still growing. So instead of measuring at 7 weeks when there was no heartbeat, it was measuring at 9, but there was no pregnancy in there. So then they said, like, we need to schedule you for a DNC like tomorrow. So we did the DNC, and that was really hard because we were not on a good page. Like our marriage really struggled in that, and that was probably definitely the low point of our marriage. If we're being real and honest, like we both were grieving separately, very different. So that was really tough.
Yeah, that was the toughest part for I think both of us, just not knowing how each other grieve. And of course, like we'd never talked to anybody about any of this, and we are just going based on what the doctors, and we didn't know what was next. Like we had this huge plan, we're so happy, and then our dreams are basically crushed. Our pockets are basically empty, and we're just like, what now? Like what's next for our marriage? And we still had to go through this process of the DNC as well. which is difficult in itself. And you just know that there's still, after that, it's like, no, there's no relief. Like, we're not getting anything out of it.
Right. First of all, thank you guys both for sharing, like, just so honestly and transparently. I have so many questions going back to number one. I think Amanda and I both like are incredibly sorry that you had to go through that experience. Sorry for your loss. I think anytime you have a miscarriage, it's devastating. Number one. Number two, after going through IVF, right? There's been so much leading up to that. And then number three, I know I've had this experience with my husband, and this is where my question is going to come, but finding out about it in an ultrasound. I think that's really difficult too. And so I'm sure Sara looked over at Brady, and like, you as the husband, like, what I would really love if you're comfortable kind of sharing your thoughts through the process too, because you're not the one sitting there having the ultrasound, but you're sitting right next to her, probably holding her hand. I mean, what was that whole, I know my husband, we've been in your shoes, unfortunately, as well. And he just starts crying, and he's like, I don't know what to do, but then he's trying to be strong. So, I mean, how was that experience for you as a man?
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of like the kind of struggle with like a relationship was from too, just during that, like that whole experience after, like when I'm sitting there and I'm noticing that there's no heartbeat, like I just knew, like deep down inside, like my heart just like dropped, and I didn't even know what to expect because I wanted to ask the tech, but it's so quiet in there and I didn't want to like scare Sara if that's not what it was. So I was just like, I don't even know, probably just straight face, like didn't know what to expect. And when she told us, like, Sara started crying, and I think that at that time, obviously, I wanted to cry, but I just had to be strong. And I think that's where that whole time after of us grieving, I was trying to be strong, like for Sara, like through this mentally, but I wasn't like grieving it myself because I was trying to be supportive and there. And I just basically held everything in. And I think that's kind of where the miscommunication slash like, just like the issues with the relationship came from, was because we were grieving differently, basically, because I wasn't grieving at all. And then when I did start grieving, it was just a shock, I guess, to like her and to me, that like I had all these feelings that I didn't even know. And then they're all going out onto her, that she didn't even know that I was going through this. So we ended up going to like um, getting I guess like a counselor, to help us through some of the issues like that. And we've been going ever since, and it's been helping just with everything through this whole process. But I mean, without that, yeah, we would have been really struggling.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Amanda, did you and Chris, Josh and I experienced the exact same thing that you guys are talking about, just very different grieving styles.
100%. And I know like Chris exactly reacted kind of the same exact way you did. He just wanted to be so supportive of me and just be like, try and be there. But by that, I feel like he didn't truly get to process everything that he went through. And so, yeah, I can completely relate to that. And I think it's just so important that you're on here and saying that, because I feel like so many guys really don't come on and tell us this part of it. And I think it's just really important that you guys are here, and the counselor part of it too, that you guys were able to then seek counsel and get to work through it. I think it's really amazing you guys are sharing that. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely wasn't easy, going through that whole process and everything, but it was something that we had to go through. And, it made us to who we are now, to get us through the second round and still be like in good faith that we're in right now and on the same page with everything. I mean, it definitely was, I would not put it upon anybody to go through what we went through, but to be where we're at now, I guess it's what God had planned for us. So
yeah, I think I can kind of segue that into the second round, because we were on different pages. I was like, okay, like I feel like we should do another round. Like, I'm not ready to give up. He was kind of in the mindset of like, this is God's way of telling me I'm not supposed to be a dad, so I'm not ready to do another round. And so that's also what pulled us apart.
That's the hardest. My husband and I continuously, I mean, I don't know, Brady, how much you know of our story, but we went through this 6 times before we got our daughter now. And the same thing, Sara, like it almost made me more ready to try again. And my husband's like, I can't watch you go through everything you just went through, DNC inclusive. I don't know if I can sit in an ultrasound room and get that news again. And he was like, we need to wait. And the amount of just like, irritation with each other continued, because it's like a lot of issues you have time to get on the same page with your partner, but something like this, you're like, I don't have the time, like we have to go tomorrow. And so I can relate. It is a very normal situation, and it's hard, and it's beautiful that you've done the work to figure it out.
Yeah. I remember telling him, like, we can't wait to plan another cycle, because by the time we're ready, it's going to be booked out 6 months. Like,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that you have to plan when you're not ready to plan again.
Yeah. And it's the same thing of like, you're not even ready to make the decision on the DNC or natural. And it was just, it was eye-opening to me that that's the first thing Brady said. He's like, and then we left the room and they told us these were the 3 options. And I'm like, it's just such a fast process. You don't have time to make decisions.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, then we went back to our original clinic and we said, okay, if we're going to do another round, what would you do differently? Because after, again, this is where I guess my lupus comes into play. They think that my subchorionic hemorrhage was maybe part of my lupus stuff. They had found all these different antibodies. I have the SSA antibody. I have like whatever other lupus antibodies. I'm a walking autoimmune nightmare.
Amanda also has lupus.
Awesome. Well, maybe we'll have to connect, because
about all the markers we both have.
oh my gosh. Yeah. They didn't actually say I was a walking nightmare, but I could definitely tell that by all the red that was in my chart.
Yeah.
So yeah, the clinic here in Fargo, we went back and they're like, there's nothing we would do differently. We don't see any, different outcomes. And it's just like, ooh.
We're not going to go through that same process for potentially just the same outcome.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not going to do that again. So
Yep.
that's when we started like researching, like, where else can we go that has like a specialty in this,
Yeah, we had looked in like in the Minneapolis area, in like Minnesota, there's a bunch of like clinics. Like there's one in Colorado. I'm sure you guys have talked about it before. I think is it CNY or CYN or something?
CNY.
Yeah. So we looked into those, but then randomly my coworker said she knew somebody who went to Barbados, and I was like, "Ooh, that sounds far-fetched and maybe a little sketch." Like the more that I like heard her talk about it, I was like, "Okay, like I'm gonna hear you out. Like we're gonna lay out all the options. If we're gonna do another round, let's just lay out all of the options." So then she got me connected, and I talked to them, and they had nothing but amazing things to say about this Barbados clinic. They said that hands down, they were the nicest. Like the communication was like more than what they could ever ask for. Like the service, the cost was a little bit cheaper than what you would pay in the States. Granted, there's no insurance, but it's still like, I guess, the out-of-pocket cost. And then, yeah, you're in paradise a little bit. So like,
and so I guess like the biggest thing with that was too is we try to get consults for all these places, and everywhere is like, oh well, we can set your initial consult meeting for like 3 months from now. And it was like, okay, like we don't have time on our side. Like you want us to wait and then like start the cycle 6 months from then? Like, in Barbados, I think it was like, are you guys available next week? And we're like, yep, we'll be available. So we made it work. And
their communication was amazing. I sent in an email for the consultation. I had all of the information, our story. The nurse director emailed me personally and had this whole long like email. I'm like, I'm so sorry, Sara and Brady, like you have been through this. Like, we specialize in diminished ovarian reserve. Did your doctor do anything about lupus? Did you have a special protocol? Like all the things. She laid out the cost, everything. And I was just like, surprised.
And isn't that so eye-opening when you're not even a patient of theirs yet, right? And they're like, here, let me try to help you. I got a second opinion in my case as well. And it's just, you got to shop around because your experience can be very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
And then, we were able to get into the, talk to the doctor right away. And you can probably take that from there.
Yeah. Like the doctor, I guess, like me, I went to college, like I was going for exercise science. So I've taken like a bunch of biology and chemistry and just know a lot about that kind of stuff. And the doctor was totally just like speaking. I knew it was just speaking way above Sarah's head. And she's sitting over there looking at me and I'm like, it makes sense, everything that he's saying, like for what I know.
I'm like, are you getting that?
Yeah. And even some of the stuff that he was talking about was just like over my head. He was talking about how he's been to like different like seminars and stuff like that. Like he's really just like continuing his education. And from what we heard from the place that we went to before, they were going to do nothing different. And he was talking about all these different like different medications and new technologies that are coming out and stuff. And he just really blew, I guess, us away of like how much he actually knew and how much he would actually help us. So I guess after that, we kind of just sat down, went through the costs and everything like that. And I mean, with everything in total, it was like with our flights and staying there and food, we kind of calculated that it was going to be about the same as if we stayed in our hometown and did it there. But we had a total different protocol, and we're just like, we need to do something different. Like this will get us out. Like we're going to be super stressed. Hopefully this area will make us less stressed. And I think after that, we were just like, let's make the decision to go for it.
Yeah. So we did. I do have to say it wasn't the easiest option to pursue, because they gave us, like, we had to work with a doctor here in the States that would work with Barbados, and they were giving us, test requisition forms so that we could get labs done here, monitoring. And then like they gave us the medication list, and we had to order all the medication ourselves, right? And we had to figure out the doses and like how much and whatever. Again, thankfully Brady comes in because he understands that sort of stuff. But then
that's an added layer of stress, just like a little, just added layer of like, let's make sure I get this right.
Like we need 44 vials, but the dosage needs to be this. So like you need to like make sure you get them correct. And so that was a little stressful, but we actually ended up ordering them from England because it's cheaper. So like in the United States, they kind of made a cost comparison. Like one vial of, let's say maybe like Menopur or something would be like $96 in the States. Well, it's only $33 in, Europe. And so
this gives you the flexibility to do that, because typically like when you're working with a clinic, they're gonna steer you to exactly who they want. And I mean, like Menopur, I didn't have to do that one, but they had me on Omnitrope, which is like $5,000-$6,000 a vial. I mean, it's just the prices in that the main companies use are insane.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think like
talk about Barbados.
With that, I think like some of the medications that she had to be on was like, it just made it so difficult because the doctor would send over a medication from Barbados and be like, you need to take this. And we can't buy it online, one of the medications. And we're just like, we have to work with the pharmacy here. You can't just go into the pharmacy, give them this note and say, hey, I need this medication. The pharmacist is like, wait, hold on. Like that's doctor's not from the United States. Like, why do you need this? And then we have to find a doctor in the United States that will basically like rewrite the prescription to the pharmacy, and all that jazz was just a nightmare basically to handle and deal with.
So then they put me on the more like autoimmune protocol. So they had me on enoxaparin. So they made me for the second round start in January after my period started. So I was taking shots every single day, the enoxaparin, and that is almost worse than the actual IV shots.
I was going to say, I feel like I'm very well. My undergrad is in exercise science, Brady. I feel like I know a lot of medications. I've never heard of that. What is it for?
Yeah. Can you explain that one? I haven't heard it either.
So enoxaparin, it's a blood thinning shot. You'd probably be able to explain it better.
Well, it's just like a different kind of blood thinning shot that you take the shot instead of just like, you're also taking like baby aspirin too. But this is just like an extra measure of you take this at the same time. And it's kind of like, I guess, like bettering the chances like all along.
I think they said because of my lupus, you're more likely to have blood clots and that sort of thing. They put me on this as just like a precaution leading up to, egg retrieval. But like that shot burns. Like if anyone out there, who has gone through the IVF and they've had all the, stimulation drugs, like this actually sucked. I had to take it every day. Like the burn, like it's a tiny needle, but like the medication just burns.
Yeah, that was one where you had to make sure like we don't miss an icing. Like we iced, like had our ice be like 15 minutes before, like we had an alarm set. And this was one where you don't miss the putting the ice on. There's no missing that.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I think I feel silly. So you did your entire egg retrieval. You flew down to do the egg retrieval in Barbados?
Yep.
Okay.
So wow, we can get into that.
Yeah.
I mean, if anyone's traveled too with medications, that was another stressor. We had to have a doctor's note from Barbados that we're traveling. We had a whole carry-on suitcase full
Yeah.
medication.
Well, because we have to remember too, like they put us on the highest dose protocol that they can. So like before we were just taking like one pre-filled syringe with the needle. Now we're taking 4 of those every single day for how many days? And we have it literally filled a carry-on bag of medication. So when we came home, we had like an empty suitcase.
Yeah, and the egg retrieval is not like specific until the last second, right? So like the date. So did you guys travel early to get there, or how did all that work?
Yeah, so we were down in Barbados for 10 days. We had started the stimulation process maybe like 5 days before we left for the first travel day. Took a whole day to get there. Then we got to Barbados. And then the next day, we actually saw the doctor for our first ultrasound. And so then, yeah, when we went in, they did the ultrasound. And again, like this round, we were so hopeful. Like we were getting the signs from God that like we were meant to be in Barbados. Like this was going to be our big breakthrough.
Well, and we were knowledgeable at this time. Like we were having Sarah take like these different medications like DHEA and I don't what else are you on, like
CoQ10, vitamin D.
Oh yeah.
acai berry, and just like
all the supplements.
yeah, at dinner it was like every single bite of food that she ate, there had to be a pill that went down with it, basically.
Right. So you feel a little bit more in control, in air quotes there.
Yes. Yeah. We're like, I'm like, we did everything. This is going to be great. It's going to be so much better than our first round of IVF. We get to the ultrasound and he's like, yep, I see 5 follicles. And it's like, like you get kind of crushed because we're, again, the diminished reserve. Like we thought like maybe by doing all this stuff that there would be a better chance, like there'd be more follicles. But that's just not the case. The doctor was actually really good about explaining it to us and being real with us. He goes, Sarah, with your diminished ovarian reserve, like we just like your body is not going to produce that many follicles. He's like, it's just not like what your body can do.
Yeah.
And so like that actually felt good for him to say that to us, because then we know, right?
You had a level of like, I should never come in here thinking I'm gonna have 23.
And he was real with us and all this stuff too, which was super nice. And he asked us if we had any questions or anything like that. And basically we just were kind of heartbroken at that time too, because we knew the percentage of how often stuff drops off and exactly what happened last round. We were at least hoping that, like he said, like all the medications and like the stuff that you've been doing, like, not drinking alcohol or caffeine, like all the supplements, we were hoping that at least, okay, we didn't get more eggs, but hopefully they're better quality this time. So we were hoping that not many would drop off. But
you can go into egg retrieval.
Yeah. So we went into egg retrieval and, it was just really nerve wracking. And we were waiting there for what felt like an hour before we were pulled in. And Sarah went to the back room and I was just kind of standing there and I kind of just blanked out. And the nurse basically had to come over to me and be like, what are you doing? And I was like, where's the waiting room? So I went in the waiting room, waited, and Sarah came out and they basically told us the news that,
he came out and said, we got 4 eggs. And I'm like, oh man. Again, just because we're not going into this naive anymore. We know, we know the process. Do we trust the process? Not really. So then, I guess from there, you wait until the next day. And then they messaged us. Only 2 of the eggs were mature. So then they, did the ICSI and fertilized that. And then from there, one kind of stopped growing. They didn't really know what it was doing. And then the one fertilized. And so then basically from there,
we still had a few days left in Barbados and we were trying to think, like, we were not in the best mood at all. Like, like we kind of just wanted to go home. So you're looking at flights to go back early and it just wasn't working out. And we're just like, not like, we're going to stay here, just like relax, take the time off. Like that's what we need at this time. But it was hard to relax knowing in the back of our mind, we basically knew like there's one left. It has to make it through. It has to make it to the blastocyst stage. It has to pass PGTA testing. we have to get pregnant and then we have to stay pregnant. And we were just like, in our heads, we were basically just like, we're not having a child this round. Like we kind of just knew, which was really difficult because then again, I think we went into the same thing that we went into last round was I was trying to be strong and like supportive of Sara because she knew that basically. So I wasn't really grieving it myself as much. But luckily we've been through the counseling to realize that was the case. So we kind of helped each other through that. But
Yeah.
I guess like on our flight back.
Yeah, we were heading back, and they said that they would call us. And I told Brady, I'm like, they're gonna call at the worst possible time because usually it was Barbados time was 2 hours ahead of what our normal time was. So I'm like calculating, I'm like, okay, that's gonna be when we land in Dallas. It might be when we're on the plane. It might be when we just land. Sure enough, we're getting off the plane right into the jet bridge, like right into the circle area, and they're calling, and it's like, oh, and Brady's like, we got to answer it. So then we pull ourselves aside while people are walking past us, and they're telling us this news that our embryo did not make it, and it's just like this gut
God.
Yeah.
I'm
'cause,
so sorry.
like, what do you do, right? You're hearing the worst news of your life, and then it's just like a blur of these people walking past, but you're trying to hold it together, but you're just in
Well, then at the same
shambles.
time, it was just like we're starving, and because we hadn't eaten, because we stayed then right before that flight, we stayed overnight
In Miami.
in Miami. So we
Oh.
slept in the airport, like
Oh
on the
my
floor, and then we get on this flight, and when we land, we get the phone call, and then it's just like, we need to
Guys.
eat,
Ugh.
and we need to find our next flight. So let's just go. So basically, like, I don't think we talked for like that whole hour of us like finding food and like going
Oh,
to like the next place. Like we just
yeah.
couldn't. We didn't know what to say to each other. Like we were just like, in
Sure.
That
shock.
phone call is so traumatic in itself, whether it's positive or good news. I mean, I got the phone call about mine in 2021, and I can tell you exactly where I was, what was said on the phone call, and that was like 3 years ago.
Mhm.
Wow, what a what a mix of events there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was literally a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah, we got back on February 23rd. Yep.
Oh my goodness. You
So
guys
what
must be
happened?
so mentally and physically exhausted still.
Yeah, I it's hard because I mean with anything it's like we don't know what's next. We had to follow up with our doctor and he said, you know, you could do another round, but I would recommend you do it in the next like 3 or 6 months. I wouldn't wait any longer. So then now we got a time constraint on our side. Like what do we do? We need to grieve the
Yeah.
failed cycle that we just had so that it doesn't come back to haunt us. And then, do you want to talk about? He did talk about this new therapy, and you could probably
Yeah.
speak on it.
It was like the PRP injection that he was saying like there's
Yeah.
really no like real studies, but there's promise showing that it could possibly help. Basically, they would do like the plasma injections into her ovaries, and hopefully that could help like them. So he would recommend that. What else did he say? There
I
was one
believe we've had a guest on the show that did that. So we'll go back and see. I'm pretty sure we did.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to listen to that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess we did research on that, and I mean, from what I know about stuff, like people use that all the time and like
Yeah.
injuries and stuff, and it obviously helps, you know. So really thinking about that, we researched, and there's like only one place in the country that'll do it, and super
Wow.
expensive. And we're like,
Not covered by insurance, of course.
yeah. So we have
Right.
to fly somewhere, have the injection, and then come back. And it's just like not only that, but we're still trying to pay for the cycle that we just had. And now we're thinking
Right.
about doing a whole nother cycle. And it's like, well, do we go to the same place? Do we research somewhere else? Like, then
And
he'll
can we share your fundraising page? I'm assuming you're gonna keep that open since you're likely gonna try to move forward.
Yeah, so it's through Lend a Hand Up in Fargo, North Dakota. We can only have it up for 6 months. So it'll probably, I don't know when, we'll officially air this, but it'll probably close down sometime like May.
yeah.
We're happy to air it sooner
Yeah.
than later because you guys
Yeah.
have been through a lot. I went on and it looks great. It looks like you guys have had a lot of engagement with it, but it looks like you're gonna need some more treatment. So let's definitely keep it up.
For sure.
Oh, well, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
yeah, it's just hard because, people are asking us what's next. And we're like, we literally just, we're stuck. Like,
Mhm.
Right.
we don't really know how to move forward because like, we're not ready to give up or hit our capacity of like not doing any more treatments. But then how many financially can you do it? Emotionally, can you do it? What does that even look like? So
And
yeah,
then
it's
the doctor is also talking about like donor eggs and stuff
Mm.
like that. And for us, it's like you want to have your own children, and at what point, like, where do you draw the line? Like, because
Yeah.
he's talking about a donor, like eggs, and then there's like
embryos.
embryos, there's like surrogacy, and just like, well, at what point do you just like adopt, or like where's
Right.
your line? And
Right.
we're not ready to give up yet, and all of that options cost money as well. So it's like a horse apiece at this time on
Yeah.
what to do.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. Like there are so many beautiful options to build your family, but it also can make the journey so much more complex and difficult because you're like, what's the route that I'm supposed to go down? I mean, my husband and I think after our fifth miscarriage, I was kind of at the boat of like, okay, we're going to adopt. I can't do this anymore. This is something I feel called to. We went down this whole route. But even then you're like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And would another option be the correct route, or is this what God's calling me to do, is this route, but I'm going down this route? And you just feel blind. I mean, I remember feeling like I was just walking off a cliff and just like falling and hoping I would land on my feet.
It's like
Mhm.
the biggest trust fall. Like
Yeah.
I was just telling someone, it's kind of like the Pink song, trust fall, baby. Like,
Yeah, it's difficult, but I mean, you guys both look like you're in good spirits. I mean, I think Amanda and I can definitely say that our journey led us to have much stronger marriages, and it's not something we would wish on anybody. And looking back, it's easy to say that, but when we were in the middle of it, I mean, my husband and I grieved very differently the entire time.
Same.
Mhm.
Yeah.
no, absolutely. And I think too, the thing that we think about too in making this decision is factoring that I do have lupus and I have the autoimmune stuff. So it's like, even if we get to the point of becoming pregnant, our trials don't end there.
Right.
Like, we don't even know if I can stay pregnant. And so it's like factoring in all of those things, because I'd have to go to maternal fetal medicine. And they've already told me like I'd have to take the enoxaparin all 9 months of pregnancy and 6 weeks after. That's already in the protocol that they wrote for me. So, yeah, I don't know. And that's a little bit terrifying too, right? Like,
Yeah.
we don't get to have the blissful pregnancy, like, especially after miscarriage and all of that sort of stuff. So,
Yeah.
If I can
yeah.
give you any little tiny bit of hope, is that being pregnant with an autoimmune, a lot of the times it could be dormant. So, like, I felt my best pregnant with lupus. I had the
Hmm.
most energy. My body felt the best. And I know, obviously, not to like, it could be different for every woman. And so I know
Yeah.
this. But if I can even give you a little bit of hope through that, like, I genuinely, my lupus feels the best when I'm pregnant versus not pregnant. So,
I will
obviously,
take
praying
that.
and
Yeah.
hoping that that's the case for you.
Yeah.
Amanda had a very nice
I
pregnancy.
did.
I did not, but she had a great one.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, is there, I mean, I appreciate you guys being on. I feel like we covered so many different bases. Brady, thank you for being on. I'm
Mhm.
sure a lot of women that listen to our podcast will be shooting this episode to their husbands to listen. I think I want to ask you both a question, but you first, Brady. I think like as the husband and as a male, and you had your own diagnosis, do you have any advice for partners and kind of how to handle this process with their wife if
Yeah. I guess just like being strong and being there for each other and not blaming your body or her body is kind of the biggest thing that we've kind of gone through. In the beginning, it was my diagnosis that I was blaming my body. It was my fault that we were having all these issues. And then she went into the thing thinking that's her. And it's like, no, we're in this together, like through the whole process. It's not you're going through it or I'm going through something. We're both going through it at the same time. And I think just having that mentality over it all is like the best way to get through it, is just being there as a team. And it's not just one person going through it or the other. I mean, like, we all have the same emotions. It's all both of our futures, and just being there for one another and trying to be there for yourself as well. You have to kind of put yourself first instead of putting the other person first as well. So
I love that.
Perfectly said. That was so sweet. Well, I'm just so excited for you guys on what's next. I know that it's super overwhelming and you're not really sure. Do you mind just one more time sharing your fundraising page and where listeners can find it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look up Lend a Hand Up, probably Fargo, North Dakota, and you search Brady and Sara Hand, you will find our fundraiser pop up. The really cool part is they actually do a boost. So every donation is boosted by 20%,
Wow.
up to $5,000. So I think we have like 2,000 some dollars right now or something to like hit that $5,000 match. So that has been a really huge blessing. Or I guess you can, look us up on Facebook or Instagram, Sara Hand, Brady Hand. I think my Instagram handle is at Sarasota Pop.
It is. It's so cute. It's and we'll tag it. We'll put it in the show notes. I know it's at Sara Soda Pop and then it's just at Brady Hand. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a my nickname from my dad as a child, so it kind of
It's
stuck
so
with it.
cute. I love it. Well, I appreciate you guys. We appreciate you guys being on with us and being so vulnerable and transparent. I know several listeners will gain hope and insight from this episode. So best of luck. Thank you again.